the spirit of reconciliation, the Theatre Thoughts podcast acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all traditional custodians of the land on which our episodes are recorded.
I had been approached by Chris Horsey saying, oh, look, I'm flying Lucy up. Could you see if she'll get her up? And I was like, well, I don't know. Does that break the rules? Because she's not just some random. She was Glinda.
Yeah.
So, I asked Kristin Chenoweth, it's not something I would normally do, but she was more of an approachable type of person. And I said, look, Glinda's going to be there tomorrow night and I know you get someone up. And she's like, absolutely.
Yeah.
Where will she be sitting? I don't know. I'll find out.
Yeah, no way.
Yeah, so she got her up.
You're listening to the Theatre Thoughts podcast, your backstage pass to the world of theatre in Australia and beyond. I'm Justin, your guide through the drama, comedy and pure magic of the stage from the heart of Australia to the grandest stages worldwide. Join us here for enlightening conversations, reviews and behind-the-scenes stories from the artists themselves. Subscribe for your regular dose of theatre inspiration and consider supporting us on Patreon for exclusive content. Follow us on Instagram at TheatreThoughtsAUS and TTPod_official and discover even more over on our TikTok, Theatre Thoughts Australia. So join us as we rise the curtain on a brand new episode of the Theatre Thoughts podcast. Welcome everyone to a brand new episode of the Theatre Thoughts podcast. I'm very excited to have my guest on today. We have a producer who has worked across many aspects of the entertainment industry for over 35 years. She's created Neglected Musicals in 2010 and has presented 25 musicals of the genre over the past 13 years. With over 20 years as one of Australia's leading entertainment publicists, she's worked and managed the media for people such as Cyndi Lauper, Barry Humphries, the Dalai Lama, Cats, The Graduate, The Phantom of the Opera, Guys and Dolls, Bernadette Peters, Kristin, Chenoweth, the Helpman Awards and more. Michelle Guthrie, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you on, to have a chat, because you have such a wealth of experience under you, and I'm sure you have so many stories that we could get into.
So many stories.
Excellent. I want to say thank you, first of all, for jumping on, because I remember the very first day you jumped into my sphere, and it was when I lived back in my old little terrible one-bedroom apartment, and I was on the verge of shutting down Theatre Thoughts because I was like, this isn't important, no one's listening, it's too hard. And I got a phone call just from this random number, and you were like, oh, hi, I'm Michelle Guthrie, I'm just wanting to know a little bit more about Theatre Thoughts. And I was like, oh, yeah, of course, I'd love to tell you more about Theatre Thoughts. And then you would just like open arms sort of welcome me into the Hayes Theatre with all the shows. And like, can you do this, and introduce me to people, and it's just kind of gone from there. So, I mean, it's a massive thank you from me.
Because we need you. The industry needs you and people like you. It's really important that what this industry is doing is covered by people like you. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. But you're on to talk about Neglected Musicals. Mm-hmm. You have one coming up, and then you have a whole bunch coming up in future projects. Mm-hmm. Now, the cast for the one coming up, If Then, which plays in November, is stellar.
Isn't it?
It is stellar cast that you have on there. So we'll get into that in a bit, but I'd love to talk about you first. So I guess for people who don't know you, I know I said a bit of a bio just then, but I'd love to know, like, what are the best things to know about Michelle?
The best things to know about me is that I love this industry with a passion, this business we call show, and I guess that's why I've always been here, and I've gone from one thing to another. I change, I guess, reinvent myself every now and again, but it's such a joy to be part of this business, and I am very lucky that I am still here.
Yeah. I spoke to other producers recently who've said the exact same thing, to be lucky to be still here. I'd love to know, what do you mean by that? Like, is it a tough industry in terms of, working as a producer, like finding the next project, or is it kind of keeping that passion sort of alive?
It's definitely not about keeping the passion alive, because I think people who even turn their back on it still have the passion and have to hide themselves from the industry because it's difficult to see it and not be part of it. And it was thinking about somebody last night who did that a long time ago, and I miss her. I miss this person. I wish she was still part of the industry, but I completely understand why she's not here anymore.
Yeah, right.
But I think the reason why people like myself are grateful to still be here is because we've seen lots of people walk away. And I knew that with the pandemic, a lot of people will go, okay, that's it.
Yeah.
I can't do this anymore on every level. And we did see that. We did see people go, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. And it is a tough industry, but it's pretty relentless as well. But it's also a big commitment. And if there's other things you want to do with your life, then, dedicating yourself to this industry can be difficult.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, you've worked with so many people over the years, like as I've listed off a couple then, and that must be rewarding in itself.
Yes, but it's, as I said to you before, it is work though.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's no
definitely.
question. You're not, when you're looking after people like that, you're not, well, okay, sometimes you might be having a drink with them at the bar, but on the whole, you are working and you are doing a job for them and their promoter and you're getting it done. But you do walk away with a lot of really interesting stories about these people. And of course, some of these people I have stayed in touch with over the years. And then there's a lot of people we have, like one of the most wonderful experiences of looking after somebody and working with someone was Hal David.
Oh, right.
And he and his wife came out a little over 20 years ago, and of course he's passed away now. And just to be with him for a few days, he was in his early 80s, and the way he talked about his life in the Brill building and the songs, and it was a joy for me to listen to that and to be with him. And we were sitting waiting to go on to Bert Newton's morning show.
Oh, yeah.
And they were playing as a kind of go out to the break when we come back kind of thing. Raindrops Keep Falling on Your Head.
Yeah.
And so he started singing along with it, and then he nudged me to sing with him.
Oh, no way.
And so I did.
Yeah.
So I got to sing with Hal David, in the alleyway under the stairs before you go on.
That's so cool.
So that was lovely. He and his wife were so lovely, and they were so lovely to me, so those experiences are fantastic.
Yeah, I bet. And I'd love to. I want to jump into some a little bit later in the podcast because I know before we started, you were talking like you already had some, and I was like, oh my god, save this for the episode. But I'd love to ask you first of all our 1 minute theatre thoughts questions and get a little bit more to know like your aspects of theatre, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay, cool. So we'll start with the first one. What has been your favourite production you've seen recently?
Recently?
Yeah.
Beetlejuice.
Did you see that?
Yeah, in Los Angeles. Yeah. And it was, I just went on my own, and I didn't really know what to expect. I had listened to it, but I didn't really have any memory of it. And I was blown away. I was like, this is a great show.
Wow.
And it's coming to Australia,
Yes,
so that's great.
So excited for it.
And the audience really loved it, and there were teenagers dressing up, and I just was, I was really impressed.
I find that fascinating because it's an old film.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I mean, I love the film itself, but it's an old Tim Burton film. And I think it's got this TikTok generation audience,
Sure.
which I find fascinating. But I think that's part of its popularity as well.
Well, there were definitely people there that were bringing their teenagers and quietly standing in a corner while their teenager was just loving being in the foyer and buying the merchandise as they're happy to be there. But also what was great about that experience for me was that it was a very well-behaved audience. And
yeah, nice.
I don't know if you've been to the Pantages in Los Angeles. It's going to be really hit and miss. People are bussed in. It's not like Broadway.
Yeah.
They were a very well-behaved audience. There were no phones out. There was no, at the end of every scene, people getting up and going to the bathroom. It was such a great room to be in as well because they knew the show better than me.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I love it. I'm so excited to see it in Melbourne. Name a play or a production that left you speechless.
Well, I think, with questions like that, the answer is usually something you saw when you were younger, when you can still be affected in that way.
Yeah.
And it probably would have been absolutely everything I ever saw. But you really can't get past that original production of Les Mis.
Yeah, right. Okay.
And I was lucky enough to see it a few times in the first month.
Yeah.
And it's gobsmacking. It was gobsmacking. It was just that particular production. And of course, the show's very different now. I took my daughter to see it at the Pantages in Los Angeles recently. It is a different show now.
Yeah.
So for those of us that were lucky enough to see that original production and that original Australian production with that cast, it did. That absolutely affected me and blew me away.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think mine was I saw Oklahoma in the West End, and I'd never seen
Which one?
the new one, the adapted one. Because I've never seen Oklahoma. I know obviously Hugh Jackman did the West End version, and I was like,
Never seen Oklahoma.
oh no, never seen it because it wasn't. I was like, my friends told me about it. And I was like, I don't really think that's for me. And so when I was watching,
It's Oklahoma.
yeah, I know it's like it's
It
and
changed everything.
Yeah, and it was like this Rodgers and Hammerstone. So I'm like, I get it, it's Oklahoma. And I went to see this in the West End, and I felt like I was watching two productions. I felt like I was trying to dissect the original Oklahoma, but then also how they've changed it. And what they did with it was, it left me speechless because it was like sexy, it was dark, it was like really unsettling in parts. And I thought it was a
Wow.
really fascinating way to take like a show that some people say is outdated, but making it so relevant still.
Right.
And I was left speechless by it, honestly.
Well, hopefully we'll get that version of the show here.
I hope
soon.
so. I
Yeah.
hope so because it's great. Okay, sorry, I went off a tangent then. What is a dream show you'd love to tackle? I guess it kind of
forgot about that
neglected
one.
musicals as well. Kind of could feed into that, I suppose.
Well, I would have said City of Angels. See, but of course it's been done now. But with Neglected, it's very difficult to do a show within a show, and you'd be surprised how many there are.
Okay.
And City of Angels is kind of like a show within a show
Yeah.
to symbolise the two different worlds in a neglected format would be difficult. I mean, another one is Me and Juliet, where it's people putting on a show, and when they're already walking around with scripts in their hand, it's a bit difficult to go, oh, now they're rehearsing the other show with scripts in their hands. So,
Right.
but yeah, no, I think all shows I would like to tackle. There's not one particularly. Like, I'm really glad that we're finally getting around to playing our song next year. So, that's exciting, but they're all exciting.
Yeah.
The shows.
I love that you still get so excited for it. It's great. Do you have, or what is your all-time favourite musical? Is it Les Mis?
Les Mis,
Yeah.
but also Into the Woods.
Oh, yeah,
it's a
yeah.
tie. I can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
Les Mis and Into the Woods. And if I had to go a third, Sunday in the Park with George.
Oh, lovely. That's
Yeah.
a great one as well.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. And the last one, which I love asking producers, which production would you most want to see come to Australia?
Yeah, this is really tricky. I mean, I'd really love to see the Gender Swap Company.
Yes.
And,
yes.
and I believe
Yes.
that is coming.
Oh,
so we will get to see that. I think that's just always about timing
Yeah.
with stuff like that. All the Sometimes.
Yep.
All the Sometimes, including the new one. I would love that to eventually come. I think Hadestown,
Yes.
I did see it on Broadway. I think it's a tricky one to do here. I think that it probably suits a state theatre company. It's a really amazing production. Have you seen it?
I missed it. I didn't get to see it, but
Right.
I've listened to the soundtrack on repeat. It's on like the top of my I wish list.
Right.
Yeah.
It's really quite remarkable.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that it won the Tony, because it's only with that kind of support behind it could it have lasted as long as it has
Right,
on
gotcha.
Broadway. I feel like a lot of those really good shows need that support of, Tony winner in order to get the people from the sticks to go.
Yeah,
Sorry,
definitely.
people from the sticks.
They'll come. Come, please. Well, I'd love to jump back to something you said before about Sondheim. So you love Sondheim. So I'd love to know what is it about Sondheim's shows that, you're drawn to?
Well, I think for some of us I don't know if you know this, but like the PBS in America filmed a whole lot of Broadway shows that they put on PBS, which was like the ABC. So therefore, by the 80s, there were video cassettes that people would lend to each other of Into the Woods and Sunday in the Park with George, and the documentary about the recording of Company.
Right.
That we would just watch and watch and watch and watch. So therefore, we got to completely know these shows, to fall in love with these shows. And in the end, for some of us, it's like the gospel according to Sondheim.
Yeah,
because
right.
his words, his wisdom, the way he would present life to us was nothing like anything we'd ever seen before.
Yeah.
So it spoke to me, especially the emotional intelligence of it all. Something popped up on my phone this morning from Sunday in the Park with George, and I instantly teared up. It's just, where she goes to George and says she's leaving, and it's just such a remarkable part of the show. And not only Sondheim can do it, but Sondheim does it so well.
He does, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I mean, speaking of those tapes, because I was listening and I was like, yeah, no, I know, because the other night, me and Marty, my producer, watched Tick, Tick, Boom. He'd never seen it, and it's one of my favourite films. And there's a scene in it where Jonathan Larson's watching Sunday in the Park with George on PBS because they'd recorded it.
Yeah.
And I was like, yep, that's right. So even and then he makes a little cameo in the movie as well. And I think sometimes just one of those names in theatre that will forever just be attached to, synonymous with it in a way. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, such a loss, really. But also what he left for us.
Well, exactly. I mean, we were very lucky to have him for so long.
Yeah,
really,
definitely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for that. That was a great insight into your theatrical sphere. So I'd love to jump back to you and your career before we talk about neglected musicals. So you've worked with so many people. Like I said before, Cyndi Lauper, the Dalai Lama, Kristin, Chenoweth, Bernadette Peters. Is there any stories that pop out in your head as something that's like really memorable, or you've told like countless times as your go-to story?
Look, there's the ones that, you'll get if you come to a dinner party at my house, and then there's the nice ones.
Yeah.
Look, on the whole, everybody's pretty lovely. Kristin Chenoweth was particularly wonderful.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like really, really lovely and really down to earth, and such a fabulous performer and just so generous. There's that bit she does in a show where she gets up somebody to sing for good with her. And I had been approached by Chris Horsey saying, oh, look, I'm flying Lucy up. Could you see if she'll get her up? And I was like, well, I don't know. Does that break the rules? Because she's not just some random. She was Glinda.
Yeah.
So, I asked Kristin Chenoweth, it's not something I would normally do, but she was more of an approachable type of person. And I said, look, Glinda's going to be there tomorrow night, and I know you get someone up. And she's like, absolutely.
Yeah.
Where will she be sitting? I don't know. I'll find out.
Yeah. No way.
Yeah. So she got her up and switched it. She did.
Oh, she sung Elphaba. That's crazy.
Yeah, and Lucy did Glinda. So
what an honour.
I know. And it was lovely to be there and to see that.
Yeah.
But that just, to show what kind of lovely person she was. And is. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd love to know, how did you work with the Dalai Lama?
That
when I was reading through your bio, I was like, yes, theatre. What?
Yeah, it is an interesting story because the organisation that brought him out here, and he had not been here for a long time, really at the end of the day, they just wanted people to know that he was coming, and it was a free event, but ticketed. So maybe it wasn't free, actually. I can't remember the details. But basically, I look after ticketed events, so they hired me to look after it. And basically, I was being paid to say, no, you can't interview the Dalai Lama. But then there was all this stuff with the relay torch for the Olympics and Nepal, and he started to speak out about this. So by the time he was on his way here, everything changed gear. All of a sudden we were doing press conference I was being hounded, and I had to certify press and vet press, and whereas I wasn't even going to be meeting him, all of a sudden I'm in a room with him and his people constantly trying to talk to them about what was going to happen next. And so the biggest press conference I ever did, of course, was for the Dalai Lama. And it was huge. And then we only did one-on-one interview, and that was with 7:30 Report. And they were so nervous. And the crew and Kerry O'Brien.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, and they were a mess, and they were really concerned that he would turn around and not come.
Yeah.
And at one point I'm like, we are so been ready for an hour and a half. Where is he? But with people like that, it's that they don't know what time it is, and they. I mean, whether it's not, because he's the Dalai Lama, it's because he's surrounded by so many people that tell him what to do and where to go.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden he arrived, and he shook everyone's hand, and gave people, I'm sorry, I don't know the terms of any of the things that he did, but he was really lovely, and he does have, really great English. So,
yeah, right.
But he was really lovely to me and my team, and then but that was a weird one because I thought that there was just a simple gig, to say no, I'm sorry, he's not talking to anybody,
right? Okay,
but this is how you get tickets to the show, But
and then it just turned into this massive thing.
It turned into this huge thing.
That's insane.
Yeah,
wow.
filled with politics.
Yeah, crazy.
What's that? Not a show?
Oh my goodness, it's so far out. We'll take a little ad break and then we'll talk about neglected musicals.
Brilliant.
So let's talk about neglected musicals then. So I'll read out the little bio of it. So it's a theatre initiative dedicated to presenting musical theatre that has never or rarely been in Australia. So the musicals are presented with script in hand, piano accompaniment, after only a day's rehearsal. So how did this come about? Like, what was the idea, the inspiration?
Well, I was living in London, and I walked past the Performing Arts Museum in Covent Garden, and it had a sign out the front saying, "Today, Green Willow, £5." So I was like, oh, I've heard of Green Willow. So I went in, and it was this small room, small stage, lined up chairs, upright piano, and people got up on the stage with just clip binders and sang through the songs and read the script, and that was that. And everybody got to see Green Willow, a really quite obscure musical. And I thought, gosh, we should do this in Sydney. This should happen.
Okay.
So many, many years later, I was like, okay, now's the time. Now's the time to do it. So then at what was called the Darlinghurst Theatre, which is now the Hayes Theatre.
Did it used to be the Darlinghurst?
Yes.
I did not know that.
It's older than Hayes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So on a Monday when there was no show, we would rehearse elsewhere, like the day before or 2 days before. And then on the Monday, we would go in and take the place over. And Glen Terry had never seen anything like it because it was packed and people were drinking on a Monday afternoon.
Yeah, right.
And we did 2 shows. And the first show was No Way to Treat a Lady, which Jason Langley directed. And then we just kept following it up. After that, we did Girl Crazy, the original 1930 Girl Crazy, which was a little bit more like a review.
Yeah.
And then we just kept going from there. And so eventually, we went to 3 shows, and sometimes the show would go out to Riverside the week later. And now that, at the Hayes a couple of times a year.
Yeah.
And we will never run out of neglected musicals. No.
Not at all. There's so many to do. I was actually coming back to Tick Tick Boom. I was sitting there going, oh, I'd love for neglected musicals to do Suburbia. His first show that he tried to get and never got. I'd be like, oh, that'd be so good.
It's a matter of whether they let you do that.
Yeah, and that's it. Yeah.
There's a lot of really obscure Sondheim shows that I would dearly love to do, like Saturday Night, but they won't let you do it in that format.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. The first show that's coming in November is If Then. Idina Menzel was in this on Broadway. You have an amazing cast. Blake Applevist I always pronounce their name wrong, and I'm so sorry. And Tegan Waters as well. They were in Bonnie and Clyde together.
Yeah.
So, to have them both reunited is already a plus.
Yeah.
And you have an amazing cast collected for this one. So I guess, what does it look like for anyone who's not seen it before?
Well, basically you're on a roller coaster ride with the cast. The lights are up. There's no lighting plot. They don't wear mics. The company come out. They sit on the side of the stage. So everybody's on stage for the entire time. And they just go. And they've script in hand, and they sing the songs and they do the show, and it's not a reading, it's definitely a presentation.
It is, yeah.
And because we're so lucky to have so many great performers to it does not look like they've only had one day's rehearsal.
It doesn't, because I came to Brigadoon last year, and that's what I expect. I expected them to just kind of be sitting there, there's a piano and they're like ringing it, but it was a full production, just normal clothes, nothing.
Just no sets.
No sets. And they did the full thing, and I was like, this is great. So
Yeah.
much fun.
Yeah, and you, even when somebody dies, you cry, you feel
Yeah.
it. It's like it's real. And Cameron Daddo did Big River for me, and he came up to me in the foyer and he said, "So I'm just talking to these people over there, and they say that they forget that we've got the scripts, and they say that we don't look at them." And I said,
Right.
"Yeah, no, I know that because that's how good you all are."
Yeah. Yeah.
And somebody came up to me and said, "Look, clearly they've learnt this. I didn't see them look at their script once." And I said, "Well, I can assure you they do look at their script.
Yeah.
I promise you they look at their scripts."
And the power of it as well, and how popular these are. For an example for the listeners, you did Calamity Jane with Virginia Gay, which then went on to become a touring production.
Yeah.
Because people just loved it so much.
Yeah. Yes, we're very lucky with that one. It's hard to know whether any of them would ever spin off into something more. So there's been 2 now. Calamity Jane did a full season and then a tour. A Nice Work If You Can Get It
Yep.
did a season late last year.
Yeah.
And so who knows in the future what might actually get to have a longer life.
Yeah, exactly. And you also have some more coming up next year. So did you want to talk about that a little bit more?
Yes, we're finally getting to do They're Playing Our Song. That'll be directed by Lisa Callingham. Lisa is one of those people that's been in the business for decades. And for her to now come through as a director and choreographer is just well deserved. She's got such great knowledge. She's so good in a room. She was assistant director on Nice Work If You Can Get It.
Okay.
And she was just amazing at dealing with, because COVID, all those things. Somebody's going off, somebody's going on. She's going to be a really great director.
Wow, that's great. And then Promises.
Promises.
After.
So
Yes.
Dean Dryberg, who directed Comet.
Yeah, we had him on the podcast before. He's great chat. He's
Yeah,
awesome.
so he's going to be doing Promises, which is based on the 1960 film The Apartment,
Right, okay.
but has all of the songs of Bacharach and David.
Okay,
Yeah,
right.
so things like Say a Little Prayer and House is Not a Home and all of those wonderful songs. And with Playing Our Song, I mean, older listeners will remember that it played the Theatre Royal in 1980 with Jackie Weaver and John Walters
Oh, wow.
for ages.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
It was a massive hit.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess the question I have is what constitutes a neglected musical and how do you go about picking them?
Okay, well, as I said before, we'll never run out of neglected musicals. So really, it's a director-driven program. Because it's only one day's rehearsal, a director needs to be madly in love with the show and needs to be able to see it all in their head.
Yeah.
Because you can't stop, you can't play, you can't change something that you think may not be working. You have to
Right.
really have a strong opinion on what will work, and you have to wind everybody up and just go. So therefore, directors come to me and say, I'd really like to do this. And if there's any directors out there that would like to come to me and say, I'd really like to do this, then please do. And then basically it's a matter of me curating. So, for example, somebody came to me and said, I want to do Porgy and Bess.
Okay.
And it's like, well, no. We can't do that one, predominantly because you need an African-American cast.
Right.
But somebody else came to me and said, West Side Story, not neglected at all.
Yeah.
And West Side Story is so known for its choreography. It would be, even if nobody had done West Side Story for 20 years, it would be very difficult to do it within this format.
Right, gotcha.
And also
Okay.
the shows within a show
Yeah.
are difficult as well.
Yeah, so it kind of needs to be like not so outlandishly difficult, but kind of that middle ground, I suppose. But then, so there's a lot of different elements that go into, I guess, your mind when you're picking.
And whether people will come
Yeah,
too.
that's important as
because
well.
there's we've done some that have been really, really obscure and people go with it now. I don't know this show, but it's neglected. I'll have a fun time. I'm going to go.
Yeah.
But it is great when you do get to do those extremely popular shows from yesteryear that just didn't get done here.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's a lot of those as well.
Yeah, definitely. There's a ton. Because I know I used to work on a community theatre board as one of the, their committee, and I was in charge of finding shows and going through, like, you recognise them and you go, oh, yeah, I know that one. I've never seen it, but would it work? And like weighing up your options is always a difficult but also really interesting to see, I guess what people want to see, but then what, they should see and what deserves to be seen. And it's a whole process.
Well, I mean, a lot of the ones that are particularly popular are the ones that the films were played often enough back in the day, or if
Right,
you could still
yeah.
access the film. So things like Calamity Jane, that movie was on, Bill Collins probably presented that every 6 months on a Saturday night. Brigadoon was on a lot. And there were no real professional productions of Brigadoon here.
Yeah.
There used to be this thing at the Menzies Hotel where they would do abridged versions of shows. Nancy was in a lot of them. I think Brigadoon was probably done then.
Okay.
So when we did do Brigadoon, community groups had done it, but to do it with professional performers in this way, of course people were like, oh my God, I've never seen Brigadoon. I can't wait to see it. I've only ever seen the film.
Yeah.
And people know the songs with a show like that as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I came to see it, I'd never seen Brigadoon. I didn't think I'd know it. I only knew like the parody show Schmigadoon, and I was like, oh, it must be Brigadoon.
Right.
And so when I sat and listened, I was like, oh, I do know this show.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I know the songs.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was interesting. Yeah.
And that's a big part of it too. You know, as I say to the cast, you don't get too caught up with getting everything right and perfect.
Yeah, right.
Because a lot of the time that's why they're here.
Exactly, yeah.
But also too, do remember that there is that song in Act 2 that they know that they're waiting to hear.
Yeah.
So that's the bit that's the big payoff for a lot of people. It's like, you know, with it, Anyone Can Whistle, which had never been done, but everybody knows there won't be trumpets or Anyone Can Whistle. So they're waiting for those moments in the show.
Okay. Do you think audiences are more forgiving if like there's a stuff up or like they forget a line or something like that?
I think they're disappointed if there isn't a stuff up or forget a line or
Yeah.
somebody drops their script. That's, you know, there are people who deliberately come to the first presentation.
Yeah.
There's also people who deliberately come to the last.
Right. Okay. Because
Yeah.
they want to see like the final product, I suppose.
Well, no, that just the anxiety of it. Like
right.
Yeah, I've got an old friend that says I can't come in the beginning because they really look a bit panicked. I can see the whites of their
no.
eyes and
Yeah.
the trembles
And so that makes them nervous.
yeah.
Oh,
So he
bless.
absolutely has to come to the last show.
Yeah, right. That's fascinating.
But then there's people that come a couple of times, especially if it's a show that they really like.
Yeah, exactly. It's very accessible. I love it. Well, thank you so much for telling us all about that. I think it's great. I'm really keen to see you then as well. Well, I'd love to ask you, to wrap up, a question I ask everyone that comes on, and I'm interested to hear your opinion on it. I'd love to know how you think the theatre industry's changed over the years and how those changes has affected the work that you do and the work that you create.
Wow, I could do a TED talk on that.
I love that.
How it has affected me, gosh, I don't know if I can do that one because I just keep going, pretty tenacious. I think a big thing at the moment is we're still in a phase of getting audiences back.
Yeah.
I would like us as an industry to treat audiences with more respect.
Yeah.
And by respect, I don't mean the content. I mean the process.
Right.
The process of booking a ticket, parking the car, finding out information.
Yeah.
It's very easy to deliver a show. It's not easy to deliver a show. It's easy to put on a show that people want to see. And I'm always talking to people that go, oh my God, I really wanted to see that. But why didn't you?
Yeah.
Because
Like,
I don't
what stopped you?
feel like we're making it easy enough for people to come.
Right.
And I think that we need to look at that.
Yeah.
And it's also some of the costs of tickets, educating audiences as in, you know, we have to build audiences, we have to breed audiences. And if we're not making it accessible for younger people in high school to come and see a show, then how are they going to get into the habit of coming? How is it going to be part of their life?
Yeah.
Because going to the theatre is a habit.
Yeah.
It's, I haven't seen anything for a while. What have I got to see? Who's the person in my life I go see shows with? And also, I think that there should be massive discounts for people going on their own.
Oh, I would love that. I go on my own so often.
Lots of people do.
Yeah.
And I think that there should be an incentive for that and a more kind of acceptability of that. Because I noticed it, trying to think what it was. I think it was either Nice Work or Anyone Can Whistle. I can't remember because a lot of things were on late last year.
Yeah.
But there was every Saturday matinee, there was this, so it must have been Nice Work. There was some people sitting in the foyer that were getting there like really early and talking to each other. They didn't really know each other except for being there about shows.
Yeah.
And I just thought, actually, it was Anyone Can Whistle. They came to all the matinees, and they didn't have other people in their life to talk to shows about.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, we need to encourage all this more. You know,
nice.
Theatre clubs. What happened to those?
I know. Maybe I should start one.
Off you go.
Yeah.
But we do need to encourage audiences more. We need to make it easier for them, show them some respect, make the experience better. It's great that most theatres now let people take a drink in.
Yeah.
I think we should stop short of a pizza in the front row, which I have seen.
Oh my goodness.
Tap the usher. Go get that off them.
Yeah.
And I just would like us to kind of focus on that a bit more. I feel that going to the theatre and the habit of going to the theatre has changed. I mean, they said the same things when television was invented. And stuff like that. So we need to keep engaging audiences and giving them a good reason to come. And a lot of that has to do with accessibility, ease, cost.
Yeah. I love it. Great answer. Thank you so much. You really hit me with this, the going to the theatre by yourself, because one of the big things I hate when I'm booking tickets is me going, I can't book that seat because I can't leave a spare seat, but then I can't buy that seat there because there's 2 seats next to it. It's like, I just won't go then. So it's like just little things like that is, I think, an easy fix.
Yeah, I mean, there should be a button you can click on. Going on your own, these are the seats you can pick from.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It'd be great. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Michelle, for jumping on the podcast and joining us. That was a great conversation. I'm really excited to see all the neglected musicals that come up. So thank you so much.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Massive thank you to Michelle Guthrie for joining us as our guest on this week's episode. Neglected Musicals production of If Then plays from the 22nd of November at the Hayes Theatre Company. Tickets can be booked at neglectedmusicals.com.au. This episode was produced by Echidna Audio. Follow them on Instagram at Echidna Audio for all their audio services. Once again, if you enjoyed our podcast, leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts and head to the link in this episode's description for our Instagram account, TikTok, YouTube, and Patreon. My name's Justin Clark, and I'll see you next time here on the Theatre Thoughts Podcast.
Disney's Aladdin on Broadway is among the longest-running shows in Broadway history. But did you know that it almost never came to be?
We walked out of Seattle thinking, okay, we don't have it. We have a lot of work to do.
But against tremendous odds, in March of 2024, they celebrated 10 years on Broadway.
Disney did a great job because they really took the notes.
Go behind the magic and listen to this never-before-heard story, the magical making of Disney's Aladdin on Broadway. Available everywhere you can get your podcasts.
Can you identify an Elphaba just from her defying gravity war cry?
Can you name every actress in the Wicked to Waitress pipeline?
Or does the phrase witch switch mean anything to you?
Well then,
good news!
My name's Quincy.
And my name's Kevin.
And we're the hosts of Sentimental Men.
We're here to talk,
and maybe scream,
about our favorite women in musical theater, the witches of Wicked. So if spending a Friday night in a no-good deed rabbit hole on YouTube sounds like your idea of a good time, then Sentimental Men is the podcast for you.
And with guests like Jessica Vosk, Lucy Jones, and Stephanie J. Block, chances are we've already got an episode with your favorite Elphaba.
Or Glinda, like Laura Bell Bundy, Brittany Johnson, and Mackenzie Kurtz.
So pause your riff compilations, put down your copy of The Grimmery, and give Sentimental Men a listen.
You can find us on the Broadway Podcast Network or wherever you listen to podcasts.